how I scale my business remotely 400x. So it's how I turn $1 into $400. Just kidding, it's 400 employees that we're at right now, a little bit over 400. And I'm going to go through the journey and a few lessons I learned along the way. Cool. So start off with a personal story, 10 lessons learned, and hopefully we have time for some recap closing thoughts at the end. So this is me. So I started building websites when I was a kid in the era of DSL modems, in the era of GeoCities websites and AOL disks. That's when I started. I missed the dot-com bubble, maybe in a good way, and I was really there for the, people are now figuring things out, the bubble has burst. And really, it was a really good time to be there. And, I feel like a little disingenuous if I tell people, hey, this is how I started my business. It's so easy you could do it too, because quite frankly, I would not be able to start a digital marketing agency today as I did before for many reasons. It's a lot different, right? Before, there was a term, it went away, I love the term, it was called webmaster, right? It meant one person could do everything on a website. They would write the website, you would design the website, you would code the website, you would promote the website, host the website. That was one person webmaster. Now, quite frankly, you can't do it all, right? The developers know development much better than the designers know the design, then writers know writing, etc., and you really need a team. But when I started, it was so easy, and I really felt like it was playing with Legos, quite frankly. But it was Legos with unlimited Lego pieces, and instead of just showing your Lego creation to your mom and dad, you could show it to the world. And it was so simple. For example, I had fun with it, and to me it was, I don't know, I liked it better than playing video games in many cases. So for example, it was so fun and innocent. I was watching a Simpsons episode, and it was about pranks, and the prank was funny city names, right? And I said, is there a list online for all these really funny city names out there? And I was very surprised that there is no such list online. So I went on GoDaddy, or maybe it wasn't GoDaddy then, I forget what it was, and I bought funnycitynames.com. I scoured the web to find funny city names, and I made this exhaustive list on a weekend of them. I go to a website called eBombs World, and I am bored. I submit funny city names to it. I tell all my friends to upvote it, and lo and behold, I put a little tracker on the site, Extreme Tracking, and I see people visit my website. I see them interact. I see people from different countries. And I put some banner ads on it, and I start to make some money. And that was really, really the start of things, right? And then I was around also for the MySpace era. And then one day, a really bad thing happened. On our school computers, they banned MySpace. You could no longer go to MySpace. So what did I do? I researched how to get on MySpace. I bought a domain, unblockmyspace.com. All of a sudden, all my friends could now go on MySpace through my unblockmyspace.com and a few subsequent sites. That got me featured on Forbes. The article was the MySpace economy. And later, I sold that business, website, not really a business. And that's really how I started things. And then this happened. I somehow went to a school of hospitality. Weird, right? But at that time, there was no digital marketing degree, right? Right, there wasn't even like a business degree, right? Unless like you're getting your master's, right? If you're undergrad, there really wasn't. There was either like economics, and in the school I went to, economics, you also have to do like chemistry for some reason. I'm like, I don't want to do chemistry. I guess I'll stick it out with this hotel stuff. But I'm so appreciative of this experience. Why? Because it really showed me that I don't want to do this. I saw that it's so hard to succeed in hospitality. I saw really, really talented people try really hard, right? And I said, oh man, really this thing that I kind of thought was a hobby that I kind of gave up on, like I really want to do that, right? And it really it gave me this ultimatum, right? I either figure out this whole digital thing, this website thing, or I'm stuck for the rest of my life doing something that I don't love doing, right? And pretty much that's what my parents said. They said, listen, you're not supposed to love your job, right? We're immigrants. It was like a U.S. thing to say, hey, love what you do. We're from the Soviet Union. That was definitely not a thing. It's, you do something you could actually build a family with. It's okay if you hate it. So really I was like, okay, I really got to succeed with this website stuff, or else I'm stuck with doing what I hate. So, and ultimately I got to say, that ultimatum really, really drove me, right? So it came time to graduate. and I was doing my business. I started a business now with SEO. It was going pretty well, and I called up my brother and I said, hey, Alex, here are my numbers. My brother's 6 years older than me. I said, Alex, here are my numbers. Quit your job and start this with me. My parents begged me not to do it. They said, please, I beg you, don't do it. They said, listen, I was very close to my brother, despite him being 6 years older than me. They said, promise me, don't do it. If you ask Alex to do it, he will join it with you. Please don't ask, I beg you. I did not listen. He quit. He had a good job, too, making 6 figures, working for Publicis in the city. This was a good job. But he quit, and the day after I graduated, we opened up the office. And now, 14 years later, we're over 400 employees, Inc. 5000 for 8 years, and I will tell you now a little bit about the journey. And it starts with a core truth. Small businesses need digital marketing. That was a core truth, nice and simple. As long as businesses need digital marketing, I will be the solution for them, right? And a few other things. Most can't do it alone, right? Most can't afford to hire an in-house team, especially because you need a writer, you need a developer, you need a designer. If you look at the average doctor, the average plumber, right, they can't afford it, right, but they could afford me. Also, the more you do it, the better you get. I will do SEO better than you because I do it for 1,000 websites. You do not do it for 1,000 websites. You could read all the best practices in the world. I will still do it better. Most of the times, the best practices are wrong. The more you do it, the better you get at it. That was very important. And really, there's, the sum is greater than the specific parts. And that's true even more and more so. You see that today. If all you're good at is Google Ads, pay-per-click, and your website is not optimized, your e-commerce site does not have email marketing, you will not succeed. You really need all the parts. So as long as that's true, and it will remain to be true, SmartSites has a place in the business world. Things I learned. There's nothing special about an agency. Force growth. Tell everyone that your job sucks. Pay people very little. All right, guys. I had no time to write this. I asked ChatGPT to help me out, and I should have checked. I'm just joking. These are nice hooks. I have a point for each one of them, I promise. We'll start with, there's nothing special about an agency. I think I am uniquely qualified to talk about managing people because there's nothing special about an agency. There's no special distribution. There's no special, I have no invention. I have no patent, right? It's all about the people. Any trade secrets I have, any proven formulas we figure out, their shelf life is like 100 to 200 days, right? I figure it out, or maybe like a year, 2 years tops. But really quickly, everyone knows it. It doesn't make sense anymore. We always have to keep reinventing, and who has to be there? The people have to be there. And just to make, a contrasting example, if you run a nuclear factory, you have scientists. These scientists can't go out and start peddling plutonium on the side, right? My employees can, right? So all of a sudden, I have to be really good at managing people. Forced growth. So a funny thing happened when I started out. Really my vision, right, my daydream for starting a business was me and my best buds, right, start a business, right? Just like me and my 5 friends, 6 friends, 7 friends, people that really like each other, right? And that's the business. That was always my daydream. It was in contrast to where my parents worked, these big corporate jobs, right, where you lay low and that's all you have to do. I wanted the opposite, right? But a funny thing happened. My best people, they said, hey, Mike, so, when are we going to grow? And I said, why? Why do you need growth? No, thank you. They said, well, Mike, am I going to be your only salesperson forever? And I said, yes, you will be. I hope so. Why wouldn't you be? Right? And I realized that my best people needed growth. And they really forced it. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't grow, right? I wouldn't be here. And it was very simple. We said, listen, how about this? 30% each year will grow, right? Nothing too crazy, nothing too little. And that way, if you want a team, if you want to be a leader, kind of in 3 to 4 years, you could actually be a team lead in my organization, right? So that 30% we felt very comfortable with. And, not for nothing, you multiply 30% out for 14 years, and that's how I got to where I am today. Plus minus a few years, maybe COVID years was a little bit less growth. That was stunted a little bit. And then post-COVID, a little bit, more. But plus or minus 30% is where we grew. And it was really forced by the people around me. And I'll also say, can I go back? Yes, I can. Now looking back at it, staying small would be probably the hardest thing, right? Because you can't retain talent, right? People aren't as excited, right? They're always excited with growth. Really, growth excuses a lot of things. Even hey, well, don't worry, we're worried about growth, right? It's like, if I couldn't grow, if I was forced to keep a small company, I think me managing it would be a lot harder. Tell everyone the job sucks. It works crazy well. So people come to interview us, and we tell them all the bad things. We say, you think having one boss is hard? You're going to have 20 bosses. And by the way, there's a stat I read. I don't know if it's true. 1 out of 12 people are psychopaths, right? So statistically speaking, you will have to work with a couple of them, right? The job sucks, right? And we tell everyone, and I say, listen, if you want that job, right, where you get paid well and you really don't have to do much, you could just lay low, work for our competitors. Here's a list of their job openings. Go there, right? We want the people that work really hard. We have nothing special going for us except people working really hard. And a funny thing happens is that attracts the best people, right? The people who you don't want, that scares them away. Good, right? Especially with a remote workforce, you have such a big inventory of people that you could almost do that, right? You could detract all the bad people and say, hey, listen, if you work here, you're going to have to work really, really hard, and that's exactly the people you want. And for those of you who watch 8 Mile, another funny thing happens. The bad things about the job, the employees will find out anyway, right? They're going to whisper, hey, the base salary here is really little. You got to work really hard here, like so much harder than my other jobs. And it's like, okay, guys, you don't have to whisper it. I told you that, right? I'm screaming it. Yeah, the job sucks, right? You don't need to whisper. Everyone knows, right? Yeah, he told us. We picked it anyway, right? Pay people very little initial base salary. Yeah, it doesn't work for every business, every industry. It's worked for me, right? I make it really, really merit-based, right? We start off very little, and we get up really high, really fast. Our salespeople, their base salary is around $30,000, and then we have them making over $300,000, right? Similar to project managers, right? And it's funny, it's until very recently, after 14 years in business, was like over 13 years, we didn't have to fire a single salesperson. If they were bad, they would see themselves right away, right? They look at their numbers. You can't do much with that base salary, right? And all of a sudden, all parties know, hey, this isn't working out, right? But if you're willing to work hard, here's all the people who've made it, right? And it really, it made that merit-based, really, really quickly, right? You would see it. You would see others who succeeded in it, and really you realize that, oh man, I really do have to work hard. And once you do, and you really, you actually get up in salary, you deserve every single penny of it. And, and once you're making a lot, you're not leaving, right? It's kind of perfect, right? Give everyone a small business owner's burden, right? Small businesses work really hard. And it was one of my scares of scaling. And I said, listen, when we're a small business, it's easy to make everyone work hard, right? You realize that, hey, salesperson, if you don't sell, literally this business does not exist. Project manager, if you don't answer client emails for a couple of days, this business no longer exists, right? Everyone's dependent on each other, right? And when you grow, I said, hey, how do I make everyone have this small business feeling and this small business owners, I call it burden, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? I want to give everyone a crown. In fact, in our project management portal, the project leader has a crown, right? Everyone has a crown, right? They feel that burden, right? And, I've read statistics, small business owners work 2 times harder than everyone else. I don't know how they measure that, but something like that, twice as hard. NY Enterprise Report, I don't know. But, I can really sense it, right? And we service small businesses, so we see them both ways, right? So everything we built, we said, hey, how do we make that person feel like a business owner? How do we make that person feel like a business owner? Every single person is a business owner, right? And that was really, innate into everything we did. Bad countries are good. All right, so this is a funny one. When I first started out, right, this was before the Upworks of the world, right? I went to message boards and I said, hey, I'm looking for a developer, and people would say, hey, no problem, I'll do it. Here's the rate. I gave them a sample assignment. Say, hey, do this for $20, $50, something small, and then I'm able to grade that assignment. And I gave this assignment to dozens of people, right? And then I would see, people get back, and very unfair, but, you hear these things online, oh, hey, a developer from India is not a good developer. Why would you hire there? And, that's really, really unfair. But to be honest, it impacted me too, right? So I made some decisions. So if I had the same tier person from India and the same tier person from Australia, they did the same exact deliverable. They said they'll work for the same exact amount. I would say, hey, I'm going to hire the Australian person, right? That was very unfair of me to do, right? But I did it. But then I realized that, hey, my salary is not going to go far in Australia, right? They're going to maybe have to have like a one-bedroom apartment. If really your quality of life is going to be really low with how much I'm paying. So even if you say yes right away, really quickly you're going to look for another job, right? Maybe it's the best you could do at the moment, but really quickly you say, hey, this is not sustainable for me. I cannot grow a family for this salary. I'm going to look elsewhere, right? And then all of a sudden, that flipped for me. And I said, listen, if two people do exactly the same job, I'd actually prefer someone that has a lower cost of living. And all of a sudden, they could do a lot more with that same dollar. And now, I still work with the same people I worked with that I chose 13 years ago, right? It was one person, and then I'll build out a whole team based on that. One designer, one developer. Now my developer is managing 50 developers. My designer is managing 20 designers. My writer is managing 100 writers, right? I branched out from that first people I picked. And a lot are in countries with lower cost of living. And now they have houses, now they have families, now they got married. In fact, many of them have investment properties, right? They would not be able to do that if they lived somewhere else. Cool. Be long-term lazy. Be lazy, right? Lazy is good, surprisingly. I was lazy in high school, I'll be honest, right? I was the kid who do the minimum but still managed to get a pretty good grade. Right? Same thing in college. I graduated university in 3 years, right? And I looked at it, I'm like, hey, can I do this? Can I do this 1 year faster, right? Especially with my ultimatum I talked about earlier when I said, oh, crap, like I got to figure out this website stuff or I have to get a job in hospitality. And here I was like, okay, but if I graduate a year earlier, I have that's like 1 year, I'll give myself like wiggle room. Otherwise, I would have still been in university. I'll give myself a year to figure it out, right? That was me being lazy. But the lazy, before lazy was like, I'm going to be lazy in high school so I could hang out with my friends, so I could play video games. Now me being lazy is so I could do more work, so I could be with family, right? Same lazy attitude, but different disciplines. Especially now with like AI and all the ways to automate it, right? You always have to like think that way, right? How do I do this faster, right? And again, it's like the high school kids who like, hey, you just fill this in really fast, like you figure out the rubric, you didn't, spend too much time on it, you really optimize your effort here. It's like, yeah, I actually kind of want those kids. Ignore most KPIs, right? It's funny the way I started remote, right? Because I started when I was in college, or now what is SmartSites, started before college, but when I actually hired people to help me, it was during college, right? And they were remote. And they're on Time Doctor, by the way, right? And you could really, you could track my growth through Time Doctor. I was literally like their first billable, like in 2012, like February, March 2012 was the first invoice. And I go to my billing page, I could literally track my growth through Time Doctor invoices, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so I started off remote, right? And really, like, I was just worried about performance, right? That's all I cared about, right? And, hey, could you actually write this article, right? And then all of a sudden, when I graduated and I opened up the office, right? And the way I structured it, and I still have it today, that most of our clients are U.S. businesses, okay? So my client-facing team is in the U.S., right? So they could relate to people in the U.S. So my project managers, my salespeople, my PPC analysts, everyone client-facing is in the U.S. And then my writers, developers, designers are overseas, and that's the way I structured it. And when I opened up the office, there's a lot of, I call it key point interferences. I really had a hard time. I really struggled managing people in the office where I didn't struggle remote. All of a sudden, there's debates on the temperature of the office, right? One person took lunch 10 minutes longer than everyone else, and they say, hey, Mike, is that what we're doing now? Are we taking lunch for an hour and a half? Can I take lunch for an hour and a half? Can he take lunch for an hour and a half? Like, that's not fair that you let that person take lunch for an hour and a half, right? And I hated it, right? Some people are too loud. I don't want to sit next to the salespeople. They're too loud. They're too rude. And I go, well, I just want them to make sales, right? Like, that's the only thing that I care about, right? And I had to deal with all these things. And we shut down the U.S. office after COVID. Funny story, we just signed a 7-year lease. We just painted it, well, a new office. We moved office a few times right before COVID, 7-year lease, total build out. I was hanging the last painting, and that's when COVID started, which really sucked at the time, but, ultimately it's a blessing in disguise. It let me go back to what actually matters, right? Everyone remote. And now, in the talent pool, you guys know all yourselves being remote team leaders. All of a sudden, I didn't need to find the best Google Ads specialist in Bergen County, New Jersey, high cost of living, not a big area, right? All of a sudden, I could find the best Google Ads specialist in all of the United States, right? Much higher talent pool. And all of a sudden, the things that actually matter, the primary KPIs that actually matter, they were back in the forefront, right? Also, just note, a lot of times people look at things like, I think, Time Doctor, and they say, hey, is that the KPI? I don't really care how long it takes. Yeah, not really, but it's a signal. It helps us a lot, right? End of the day, it's like, okay, before I used to write code a lot, and I would know, hey, this thing is supposed to take exactly this long, right? But all of a sudden, you have to let go, and now there's languages I don't know. I don't actually know how long this should take, right, if someone really focuses, right? So we have all these actual KPIs, but there's Time Doctor, and all these screenshots are very nice signals to come back to. Also, there's some cool things too. For example, we have designers, we get a design deliverable, and I look at design deliverable, and I'm like, I don't love it, and I'm like, I'm curious how this person got to it, right? And I go to Time Doctor, and I see all the screenshots. I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. And many times the funny thing happens through their screens. I'm like, wait a second, this version that they worked on, but they later kind of straight away they didn't show me, was actually really good. I like that much better. So I go to them like, hey, go back to what you're working on there. Right. Another pretty good one is really good one, email analytics. Right. So we have lots of project managers, and one of the things you have to do is respond to client emails. Right. And a lot of times, we would get, not a lot of times, but we would get client escalations. Hey, my project manager has not been replying to my emails. And we'd look at this and we're like, man, I wish I could know faster. That is not okay. Right, but I would know it only after the problem happened, and we said, hey, how can we know this earlier, right? So email analytics shows us time to reply, right? All of a sudden we say, hey, you should reply to client emails within working hours, within 4 hours, right? And we actually have that metric, and pretty cool. They make a little leaderboard, and I have it that each team gets it, so they can see their numbers, and they're like, okay, this person's doing really well, this person is not, right? And just by applying that, without even connecting it to performance and compensation, because I later, recently I talked to the owner of it, and I was saying, hey, I'm happy with your services. Maybe I could even, make a case study for you guys, right, if you want to, because I'm really happy with what you're doing. And he goes, oh, great, thank you so much. Here are the numbers. And it was teams increase their time to email reply by 60%. Right, and again, not even tied to compensation, just measuring it and feeding it back to people, creating a very simple leaderboard. They get this email every day of here's how many emails you replied to yesterday, here's your average time. And then every team kind of has their own primary KPIs. If you're in sales, I care about close rate, lead value. If you are a project manager or PPC analyst, I look at managed billables, right? That's their primary KPI and retention. And then if you're in operations, if you're a writer, designer, developer, it's things like turnaround time, how fast do you go through your queue, how long did it take versus how long it should have taken. And another also pretty cool thing we built, but all this stuff you could tell we take the simplest solution, right? I want the path of least resistance all the time. So inside our project management tool, we have a little feedback scores. It's just a Google form. So a project manager gets a design deliverable, and they rate it from 1 to 5. This was awesome, this was not so good. They write some comments like, hey, this looks great, but there was a typo. They didn't follow directions. It's a 1, right? And that simple feedback score then gives me lots of data. And we look at it and we say, okay, this team did really good. This individual did really bad. But everything is kind of nice and simple and tight, and it works. Make yourself replaceable, right? I think with AI now, this is more true than ever, right? You don't want it, yeah. This is a common one. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but at every piece you look at and you're like, okay, how do I create a system to get myself out of it, right? And that's always the thinking, right? Whether you see it as being lazy or you just see it as giving ownership to people that are in the battlefield, right? We're big on that too, right? It's hey, what I think is correct is probably a worse decision than people actually on the battlefield, right? People actually talk to their clients. They know best, right? So in all cases, right, hey, I want to empower the people. I want to get out of here. I want to replace myself. So I could go to running remote instead of running my business, and guess what? It runs without me. And it's not only me. I tell every people in every situation they got to do the same, right? My director of client services, she used to be a project manager. She replaced herself. She was a project manager team lead. She replaced herself. She was a project manager director with lots of different project managers, right? She replaced herself. Now it's the whole client service department of 80 some odd people, right? So not just me. Every leader needs to be thinking, how do I replace myself? Don't lead, let others lead, right? When things are going good, you really don't hear from me, right? Things are going good. Everyone actually, on the battlefield, on the ground, they're making the decisions. I don't have to do anything. When things go bad, that's when I have to go in, right? Someone asked me recently, hey, do you talk to clients still? Yeah, not really, but only when I need to. Recently, we had a vulnerability with Google Ads. All our Google Ads accounts for a short time were unlinked, right? I definitely talked to clients then. I reassured them that don't worry, I've been quiet, but I'm here. This is very serious. We're looking at it, right? Quiet leadership. There's books about it. Every leadership style is different. This is my favorite. You do not hear from me if you do not need to. But if I need to step in or take ownership of something or take responsibility and show people, listen, I got your back. I am here. You don't always feel my presence, but I'm always here. That's the leadership that's worked for me. All right, cool. To recap, maybe a good slide to take a picture of, right? Starts with a core truth. Small businesses need digital marketing. I will do it better than the individual person can. As long as that's true, everything else could run. If that falters, right, we're in an economic environment that, you don't need marketing, all of a sudden, nothing else really matters, right? So you really have to start with that core truth, right? People are your value proposition. Staying small was always the bigger risk. I think it's much easier to manage growth than to manage status quo. Set expectations, pitch hard work. That attracts the best people. Tell people they have to work hard. If they don't want to work hard, find a competitor to work at, really. Link compensation to performance as much as possible, right? Everyone should think like an owner. Owners work a lot harder, right? If you're able to create that mentality, that's really going to pay off dividends. Higher where cost of living is cheap, especially in a remote world. Let that dollar go a lot further. Tell your U.S. employees to move to Tulsa. I will be doing that, right? I have lots of employees from LA. Guess what? They don't last long because really quickly they say, hey, this is not enough. I got to get paid a lot more to live here. If they lived in Tulsa, I think they're going to stay around a lot longer. Hopefully some move there. Optimize to do less over time. Be lazy. Focus on bottom of funnel KPIs. Don't get distracted by other things, but use them as signals. Use them directionally, right? They all build a narrative. They all build a story. That's what you use them on. They're not primary. Build systems, not dependencies. Make sure the business can run without you. And quality leadership empowers teams. Not everyone's leadership style, but it has worked for me. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, man. Great talk. Which strategies have you used to give people the burden of ownership?
Good question. The question is, how do I give people, I call it the burden of ownership, right? So in all cases, I was talking to Landon earlier, and he thought this thing was genius. He said, hey, how do you pay all your overseas people? There's 300 people, right? Hey, how do you pay each one of them, right? It's probably a logistical nightmare with all their compliance and say, I don't. I built a team from one person. All my, all my link builders are from Indonesia. I start with one person, right? I pay her the full amount, right? And she distributes it to her team, okay? When it comes to hiring, when it comes to firing, when it comes to promotions, I'm not involved, right? She is a small business owner. Not really that small anymore, right? She's a business owner, right? She makes all the decisions. I'm not involved at all, except for, we look at feedback and I say, hey, this person has really bad feedback scores. We should think about, hey, can we lift it up or let them go? And 19 times out of 20, they already know, and they say oh, actually, they're already on a performance plan, right? And again, I do that with every piece of, with everything. If you're a project manager and you become excellent, then you're a leader of other project managers, right? You really feel that, hey, this is pretty much like owning a business. Cool. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Cool. Thank you, guys. Oh, no, we got one more, sorry, before the thank you.
Thank you. As a digital marketing agency, how are you employing AI in this disruptive age when it comes to marketing and using AI?
Yeah, good question. Hard for me to answer quickly. I have a whole presentation on AI. You look at the SmartSites YouTube, you'll find it. But also say, with content, we employ it a lot, but in a funny way, it hurt us a little bit because now people think like, oh, content probably takes a second. In fact, content writing now takes us longer with AI, but it's much better, right? So we've yet to find this like core disruptive AI thing. We're looking, right? But it's like incrementally helped us. Even like, I was pretty shocked actually. You know, I thought one of the first things to solve is designer designs in Figma, right? And I could have AI or some software to code it into code from the design file. And we've tried literally every solution out there, and they don't do a great job, right? So like we're very well aware of it. We try to employ it, but it hasn't been disruptive for us yet. Good question. Okay, I think I am out of time, more than enough time. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.